So our next speaker is Andrea Sanchez Davidson. Andrea came to the program with an extensive background in clean energy policy. As I've gotten to know her, I've seen how hardworking she is. She took on a project with the Surfrider Foundation, writing a report on the Land and Water Conservation Fund, made her second film with a team of students for California Sea Grant, and was selected to attend COP25 climate negotiations on behalf of Scripps, all in her second quarter. She's passionate about environmental justice, indigenous knowledge, and of course, marine conservation. The title of her presentation today is Bird is the Word, Building a Culture of Conservation for the Punta Banda Estuary and the Birds Who Make It Home.
Marina was born just north of where I stand in Camp Pendleton on the 4th of July, 2016. She is a western snowy plover, a kind of shorebird that is found on the Pacific coast from Oregon to Baja California. She was banded 25 days later by Travis Wooten, Senior Research Coordinator with the Institute for Conservation Research at San Diego Zoo Global, and given a field-readable band, which is this orange and white and red band that you see on Marina's legs here. These bands allow you to see individual birds and identify them without ever needing to physically catch them. Scientists at San Diego Zoo Global were hoping to learn more about snowy plovers and where they were going when they migrated. 1 year later, Marina was sighted at the Punta Banda Estuary by Jonathan Vargas Vega, Coastal Solutions Fellow at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology and one of my Capstone advisors. From where Marina was born to where she was sighted at the Punta Banda Estuary is a traditional land of the Kumeyaay people who lived on this land sustainably for thousands of years. This here behind me is an aerial shot of the Punta Banda Estuary, which is located south of Ensenada, a major port city in the state of Baja California. The Punta Banda Estuary is here, to be exact. It is made up of a 5-mile-long sandbar that extends into Todos Santos Bay, creating this protected estuary. It also has wetlands, muddy plains, and marshes, like what you see here. The wetland was also designated a wetland of international importance through the Ramsar Convention, an international agreement on the sustainable use and conservation of wetlands. I lived here for 5 months back in 2017. I took up bird watching and saw birds like Marina, the snowy plover, and others. This area makes up part of the Pacific Flyway, a migratory bird thoroughfare, and over 144 species of birds visit this estuary throughout the year. I felt like I'd come across a treasure, and I had. These birds were my door to learning more about estuaries and why they are so important. Birds are known to inspire wonder, and they are also healthy components of coastal and marine ecosystems. Of course, wetlands do more than provide a habitat and migration area for birds. They are also an important source of food for people, provide flood and erosion control, help filter water, and provide a place for us to do recreational activities. Despite being some of the world's most beneficial ecosystems, approximately 35% of the world's wetlands were lost between 1970 and 2015. This habitat is disappearing faster than any other ecosystem. At the same time, seabirds and shorebirds, like western snowy plovers and California least terns respectively, have rapidly declined by as much as 70% over the last 40 to 50 years. Their declines share common themes, all of which are exacerbated by our rapidly changing climate. Habitat loss due to development, predation by wild and domestic animals, anthropogenic disturbances like people driving on the beach, pollution from urban runoff, as well as more frequent high tide events. With this in mind, I embarked on my Capstone project with a goal of generating support for conservation efforts among both locals and visitors to the estuary through seabirds and shorebirds. While doing my research, I found that there was no one place where I could go to find all of the information I'd like to know as an eco-minded visitor, from a description of the area to the allowable uses, and of course, information about local birds. And so I brought visitpuntabanda.com to life, so that anyone searching for information about the Punta Banda Estuary would find my guide. This website hosts my 2 ArcGIS story maps, Birds of the Punta Banda Estuary and the Punta Banda Estuary, a guide to use, benefits, and conservation. These are 2 interactive ArcGIS story maps available in both English and Spanish, which I hope can be used to educate, generate awareness, and affect change in behavior. I wanted this map to appeal to a broad range of people, from teenagers to adults, who, like me, may visit places like the Punta Banda Estuary for its recreational benefits without knowing a lot about the significance of the area. Here you'll see my map in action, starting with a California least tern coming over to nest on top of its egg. And right away, you'll see at the top a link to the Spanish language version. My story map includes an interactive map of the Punta Banda Estuary that describes the different habitat zones, as well as the allowable uses, like the sand dune, for example, which is a mix of public-private property that you can use for recreational activities like hiking and birdwatching, or the lagoon, which you can use for recreational and artisanal fishing, or the marshes, which are a protected use area, and finally, muddy plains, which are also a protected use area. It also includes interviews or excerpts from interviews with people like Senor Rafael Ponce, a fisherman, diver, and ejido representative, as well as excerpts from interviews with biologist and coordinator from Pro Esteros, Liliana Ortiz Cerrato, as well as Travis Wooten and Gabby Ibarguchi of the Institute for Conservation Research at San Diego Zoo Global. They were kind enough to share their thoughts on marine species, conservation, and wetlands, which I hope adds a personal touch to my story map. Of course, it also includes information about the birds of the Punta Banda Estuary and the monitoring and conservation efforts that are currently in progress. I wanted people to walk away knowing how to identify at least one seabird and one shorebird that nests here. So for seabirds, I chose the California least tern, which is federally listed as endangered in the US and a special protection species in Mexico. These birds are long-lived and don't begin breeding until they are 3 to 5 years old. For shorebirds, I chose the western snowy plover because besides being an incredibly charismatic species, it is federally listed as endangered in both the US and Mexico. The least tern and the snowy plover both migrate to the estuary to nest between May and August, which happens to be prime beach-going months for people. As you can see from the pictures of the chicks and the eggs of both species, the eggs are generally laid directly on the sand, which makes them vulnerable to predation and other dangers, such as cars who drive on the beach, as happens in Mexico. Thanks to monitoring efforts, however, we know where both species like to nest, which is sandy areas near wetlands. This map here shows GPS data points of both species that were taken in 2019. You'll notice that there are a lot of nests on the northern portion as well, and that's because there is a second wetland located north of Punta Banda called La Lagunita that also adds as a nesting zone for birds. This monitoring work makes campaigns like The Beach is for Everyone, or La Playa es de Todos in Spanish, more effective, since the organizations can use monitoring data to put up temporary signs and fencing around the specific nesting sites. This ensures that the eggs and chicks are protected so that future generations of birds continue to use the estuary for resting, foraging, and nesting. Birds like Marina, who is shown here again, who return to the estuary year after year. And I'm happy to report that Marina had her first batch of chicks last spring and has returned to the estuary this year and appears to be nesting again. So, despite a federal mandate and conservation efforts, there just isn't enough time or capacity to always enforce the rules at the estuary, which is why it's so important to take steps as individuals. Not only does this habitat provide clean air, fresh fish, and water, but access to natural areas has been known to contribute to mental well-being. So I leave you with my tips for any future visitors. Share the outdoors with wildlife, and be sure to give birds in their nests plenty of space. And please, don't drive on the beach. That said, explore the estuary. Apps like eBird, or A Ver Aves, as it's known in Mexico, and iNaturalist can help you identify species while also helping to contribute to citizen science projects. Finally, get involved. Participation in monitoring, workshops, and beach cleanup events with organizations like Pro Esteros and Terra Peninsular are a great way to learn more, all the while building local community. And of course, these tips don't just apply to the Punta Banda Estuary, they are really applied to any natural space near you. In the words of Travis Wooten, if we address key threats, conservation and recovery can be achieved. For anyone who's interested in accessing my website, please go to visitpuntabanda.com or scan the QR codes shown here to go directly to the individual story maps. Looking forward, I plan to continue to build my website so it includes even more information about Punta Banda, including information on local orgs and businesses. My plan is to share the website with a variety of sustainability, conservation, and travel-focused organizations so that it can reach a broader audience. Additionally, I'm hoping to visit the Punta Banda Estuary later this summer to participate in monitoring efforts with my new colleagues and friends at Pro Esteros. Finally, I'd like to take a moment to thank my Capstone committee, who were invaluable partners in this process. Starting from the center and working my way clockwise, Liliana Ortiz Cerrato, biologist and coordinator for Pro Esteros, Jonathan Vargas Vega, Coastal Solutions Fellow with the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, Amy Work, GIS librarian with UC San Diego, Laura Martinez Rios del Rio, director and founding member of Pro Esteros, and Dr. Rachel Clemesha of Scripps Institution of Oceanography. I'd also like to note that all the photos in my presentation, as well as in my story map, were provided by Pro Esteros, Jonathan Vargas Vega, and Bobby Garza, who is a Punta Banda local. I'd also like to thank everyone at Scripps, especially Samantha and Risa, who answered an innumerable amount of questions throughout the last year and who are a great resource for any questions or worries we had. And of course, to the incredible cohort of friends that I've made over the last year, I am so grateful for each of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. So we've got a few questions coming in. Can you tell us a little bit about how you gathered the information for your project?
Sure. So it was actually a combination of doing academic literature reviews, coordinating with my Capstone partners who shared their data with me, and also reaching out to individuals at the estuary who were able to provide personal context for the work going on down there.
And what were the limitations of doing your project, if there were any, including, and especially, I would imagine, COVID and quarantine?
Sure. So originally, I had hoped to go down there myself to contribute to the data gathering. But since that wasn't possible, I used the data that was available. But what I found was that there was not a consistent set of data that could be used to make a good comparison. For example, I was able to find data from 1989 to 1991 that showed least turn monitoring numbers, but data hasn't started to be collected again until 2016. And so while you can compare the data from back then to now, it doesn't tell the full picture of what has happened over that time.
And you told us a little bit about where your story maps will live. And do you have any plans to make sure as many people as possible see these story maps, and/or do you have any plans to make more educational story maps like this?
Yes, absolutely. So I am definitely planning on reaching out to, as I mentioned, a variety of organizations. Additionally, I'm part of 2 Facebook groups, one called Talk Baja and the other specifically around the Punta Banda community. And so I'm hoping to share it through those networks, since those are the kind of people that are coming down to Baja anyways. Yep.